Hello everyone, another Christmas season is coming, let's listen to Christmas stories. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos of the channel. And if you have any requests for the next content story, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you. The wind howled like a chorus of forgotten souls. Snow fell in thick, relentless waves, blanketing winter's hollow in an eerie silence. The clock tower struck midnight, its chimes muffled by the storm. In the heart of the town square, a single candle flickered in a window. From within, faint notes of a haunting melody escaped into the frozen night, a carol that hadn't been sung for a century. Ethan Porter hated small towns. As a journalist for City Beat, he thrived on chaos, controversy, and fast-paced deadlines. So when his editor assigned him to cover Christmas folklore in a sleepy village upstate, he protested. "It's Christmas, Ethan. We need something heartwarming. A feel-good piece." "Ghost stories aren't exactly heartwarming," Ethan had countered. But the editor's glare had silenced him. Now, as he drove into winter's hollow, his skepticism grew. The town looked like a postcard, snow-dusted roofs, twinkling lights, and cheerful decorations. Yet something felt off. Ethan parked his car outside the town's only inn, a quaint structure with ivy-covered walls and a sagging wooden sign that read Holly Hearth Inn. The windows glowed warmly, but as he stepped out into the biting wind, he caught a strange sound on the air, a faint hum, barely audible over the storm. He turned, scanning the empty street. Nothing. Shaking his head, he trudged through the snow, suitcase in hand. Inside, the inn was cozy but eerily quiet. An older woman with sharp gray eyes greeted him from behind a desk. "Welcome to Winter's Hollow," she said, her voice formal. "You must be Mr. Porter. Room 5, upstairs." Ethan nodded. "Thanks. By the way, I heard something outside just now, like singing. Does this place have carolers?" The woman's smile faltered. For a fleeting moment, her gaze flicked to the frosted window. "It's the season," she said after a pause. "But don't pay it any mind. People around here get nostalgic this time of year." Ethan didn't press further. He climbed the creaky staircase to his room, the faint smell of pine and cinnamon following him. The room was simple but comfortable, with a view of the snow-laden town square. He set his suitcase on the bed and glanced at his watch. Nearly 10 p.m. He had enough time to get some preliminary interviews in before the night was over. Ethan found the town square deserted except for an old man sweeping snow off the church steps. The man looked up as Ethan approached, his weathered face lighting up with curiosity. "Evening," Ethan began. "I'm Ethan Porter, a journalist. I'm writing a piece on local Christmas traditions. Would you mind answering a few questions?" The man leaned on his broom, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Christmas traditions, eh? Not much to say, except for the carol." "The carol?" Ethan pressed, his pen poised over his notepad. "The silent carol," the man said, lowering his voice. "It's what this town's known for. Used to sing it every Christmas Eve, long ago. But now..." He trailed off, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone or something. "Now what?" Ethan asked. The man sighed. "Now it's just a memory. They stopped singing it after the Hollow Night. Never should have sung it that night, neither." "What happened on the Hollow Night?" The old man's expression darkened. "You'll hear all kinds of stories, but here's the truth, the carol woke something that night. Something that don't belong in this world. People died. Good people. Since then, no one dares sing it." Before Ethan could ask more, the man gripped his broom tightly and shuffled back into the church, slamming the heavy door behind him. As Ethan walked back toward the inn, he felt a strange heaviness in the air, as though the town itself were holding its breath. The snow muffled his footsteps, and the only sound was the faint whistle of the wind. Mr. Porter. Ethan spun around to find a young woman standing a few feet away. She was bundled in a thick coat, her face half hidden by a scarf. Her green eyes gleamed with urgency. "You shouldn't be here," she said, stepping closer. "Not tonight. Not this week. Excuse me. The story you're chasing, it's not worth your life," she continued, her voice trembling. "Leave before it's too late." Ethan frowned. "Listen, I appreciate the concern, but I'm just here to write about some old song. It's not a big deal." Her expression hardened. "It's not just a song. The silent carol is a curse. You don't know what you're dealing with." Before Ethan could respond, she turned and disappeared into the swirling snow, leaving him with more questions than answers. The next morning, Ethan sought out the town historian, a man named George Whitlock. George's office was tucked away in the back of the town library, a dimly lit room overflowing with dusty books and yellowed maps. "The Silent Carol," George said, adjusting his glasses. "Ah, yes. A fascinating piece of Winters Hollow folklore. Composed in 1823 by a local woman named Clara Hensley. Legend has it, she wrote it as a lullaby for her children." "And the Hollow Night?" Ethan asked. George hesitated, then pulled a brittle newspaper clipping from a drawer. The headline read, "Tragedy in Winters Hollow, 23 dead in Christmas Eve fire." "It happened a century ago," George explained. "The townsfolk were gathered in the church, singing the carol, when the fire broke out. Witnesses claimed it wasn't just flames, there were shadows in the smoke. Figures that moved on their own." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Shadows?" George nodded gravely. "They say those who died weren't just burned. They were taken. And the carol was to blame." Ethan spent the afternoon poring over the town's archives. Most of the documents he found referenced the silent carol only in passing, as if the town had collectively agreed to erase it from memory. But one ledger caught his eye, a dusty songbook marked Clara's hymns. Inside, Ethan found the original lyrics of the silent carol. The first few verses seemed ordinary, describing a peaceful Christmas night. But as he turned the pages, his breath hitched. The final verses were unlike anything he'd seen. "Through winter's veil, the spirits creep. From hollowed ground where shadows seep. They rise to sing, their voices near. On Christmas Eve, they'll bring you fear." The lyrics sent a chill down his spine. The song wasn't a carol, it was a summons. Suddenly, the air in the library grew colder. Ethan's pen rolled off the table, spinning to a stop on the floor. He glanced around, his pulse quickening. Was it just his imagination, or was something watching him? By the time Ethan left the library, a fierce storm had engulfed Winters Hollow. Snow fell in dense sheets, obscuring his path back to the inn. The town square, which had seemed quaint earlier, now looked otherworldly under the dim glow of streetlights. As he trudged through the snow, he heard it again, a faint melody, rising and falling with the wind. It was hauntingly beautiful, yet deeply unsettling. He stopped in his tracks, straining to locate the source. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And then he saw them. At the far edge of the square, shadowy figures emerged from the storm. They weren't people, at least, not anymore. Their forms flickered like candlelight, faces obscured by swirling darkness. Slowly, they began to move toward him, their footsteps silent against the snow. Ethan bolted, his heart pounding. Back at the inn, Ethan slammed the door behind him, gasping for breath. The innkeeper looked up from her knitting, her expression calm but tense. "They're waking up, aren't they?" she said quietly. Ethan froze. "You knew?" she sighed, setting her knitting aside. "Everyone in Winters Hollow knows. That carol should never have been written. But Clara, she wasn't just a composer. She was something else. A medium, they called her. That song of hers? It binds the spirits here, but every 100 years, the binding weakens. And if someone sings it? They're freed, Ethan finished, the weight of her words sinking in. She nodded grimly. That's why no one dares hum a note. But now, the centennial's here. The storm's just the beginning. Ethan's resolve hardened. He wasn't going to let a ghost story stop him. Armed with his flashlight and a copy of Clara's lyrics, he ventured out into the storm. If the carol really held power, he needed to understand it and stop it. The church loomed ahead, its broken steeple silhouetted against the stormy sky. The doors creaked open as he entered, revealing a cavernous interior lit only by his flashlight. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of ash. Rows of charred pews stretched toward the altar, where a lone music box sat. Ethan approached cautiously, his fingers brushing the intricate carvings on its surface. As he turned the crank, the silent carol began to play. The shadows returned, pouring into the church like black smoke. This time, they had form faces twisted in agony, arms reaching out. Ethan backed away, clutching the lyrics. If the carol binds you, he shouted, then I'll finish it. He began to sing the verses Clara had written, his voice trembling but steady. The spirits froze, their forms wavering. The final verse echoed through the church. Return to rest, beneath the snow. Let peace replace the pain you know. The shadows screamed, their forms dissolving into tendrils of smoke. One by one, they vanished, leaving the church silent and still. The storm lifted by morning, sunlight breaking through the clouds. Winter's Hollow looked peaceful again, as if the night's horrors had been a dream. Ethan stood in the square, watching the townsfolk emerge from their homes. The innkeeper approached him, her expression both relieved and curious. You sang it, didn't you? She asked. He nodded. I finished the song. I think it broke the curse. She smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe it's just sleeping again. Ethan didn't reply. As he packed his things and prepared to leave the town, he couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits weren't gone. Not completely. As his car disappeared down the snowy road, a faint melody drifted through the air, soft, haunting, and unmistakably familiar. The silent carol would never truly be silent.